Hey folks, we are going to be waiting just a few minutes as folks are entering in, and we'll start in just a moment. Hello, everyone. The inter rate has started to slow down a little bit, so we will go ahead and get started. This is an afternoon meeting, and I want to make sure to be respectful of time as much as possible. Well, first, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to Does Your Tree Equity Score Make a Difference? A multi-city panel discussion. We are happy to have you here from wherever you are joining us from. My name is Rebecca Gilbert. I am the Associate Director of Education at Trees Atlanta. If you are not familiar with Trees Atlanta, our mission is to protect and improve Atlanta's urban forest by planting, conserving, and educating. This program today is happening as part of our Arbor Week, the celebration. Our Arbor Day is the third Friday in February, and we work on putting together a week full of programming surrounding the event, from this program to seedling adoptions to online resources and an in-person author talk this coming Friday evening. And that doesn't even begin to start on the number of plantings we have happening this Friday and Saturday around the community. And I want to make sure to let you know how grateful we are to the City of Atlanta for their support in sponsoring this event today. I know we should all be Zoom experts now, but I always have to refresh myself on how to have an enjoyable experience. So for today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions that you'd like to ask throughout the program. We'll be moderating those questions and trying to ask as many of those as time allows at the conclusion of the event. And we'll be utilizing the chat feature down at the bottom of the screen in order to share resources with you. So quick link websites and resources that the panelists have provided. So you'll want to keep the questions in the Q&A and keep the chat clear for resources. If you need closed captioning, we have enabled that. And so you'll need to utilize that feature. It's down at the bottom of your screen. And if you don't see a CC box, you may have to click three dots with a more button to find that option. And please note that this session is being recorded, and we will send out the recording with any unanswered questions following the event. And as with any program, we always want to keep doing better. So please, at the conclusion of the webinar, you're going to receive a survey. Please take the time to complete that and send it back to us so that we can continue to provide meaningful programs that folks are interested in. And we also obviously want you to learn more about what we're doing. You can sign up for our newsletters to learn about upcoming events or opportunities. You can check out our website at treesatlanta.org. And you can also choose to follow us on the social channel of your choice. All of our handles are listed there. And now the agenda for the afternoon, just to give you an idea of what's going to be, how the flow is going to happen. We'll start off with a presentation from American Forests and regarding what the tree equity score is and a basic general overview on how it came to be, how cities, organizations can utilize it. We're going to hear from each of the organizations on the panel on who they are, what they're doing in their communities. Trees Atlanta's Greg Levine will then be moderating and asking questions that were submitted in advance or during the course of the presentation to our panelists to respond, share their organization's perspective on how to best utilize or how they are utilizing the tree equity score. And like I said, we will try to get to as many questions as possible. And if we do not, we will be working on getting those answers to all of the participants. And now I'd like to introduce who our panelists are for this afternoon. We have Natalie Jones, the Projects and Volunteer Coordinator with Trees for Houston. Erica Smith-Fitchman, she's the Community Forestry Manager with Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. Lisa Chaffee, City Forester with City of Pittsburgh. Danielle Crumrine, Executive Director with Tree Pittsburgh. Allie Lakehart, Trees for Seattle Lead with the City of Seattle. Greg Levine, Co-Executive Director with Trees Atlanta. And now I'd like to start things off with Chris David, Vice President of GIS and Data Science with American Forests. And he's going to give us an introduction to the tree equity score. Thank you, Chris. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. I want to start off by just thanking Rebecca and Michelle and Greg and everyone at Trees Atlanta for having us and for allowing me to present this work. We're really, really excited about it and excited to share it with you all today. So let me make sure that I'm sharing the right spot. There we go. So I just want to start by just saying a little bit about American Forest. You might not know that we are actually, in fact, the oldest national nonprofit conservation organization in the United States. We've been around since 1875. We're coming up on our 150th year anniversary, and we're going to celebrate when the time comes. So just 3 years away from that. And our mission has grown and changed over those 150 years, but this is our mission now. And it sort of builds on everything that came before. We create healthy and resilient forests from cities to wilderness that deliver essential benefits for climate, people, water, and wildlife. We advance our mission through forestry innovation, place-based partnerships to plant and restore forests, and movement building. That's our mission. And our vision, which sort of leads directly right into our tree equity score work, is we envision a world which the significant environmental, societal, and economic benefits of forests are fully realized and equitably available to all people. So we're here to talk about tree equity score today. Trees provide, like my executive, our CEO at American Forest, Jad Daly, likes to say, offense and defense in the face of the climate crisis. We know that the urban form, impervious cover, and others create challenges in an urban setting, increased temperatures. The urban heat island effect is getting larger and larger as population increases, impervious cover increases. More people are coming to cities, and how can we help and fix that? So if you don't mind taking just a moment with me and just doing a little eye exercise, this is all stuff that you probably already know. So I just zoomed in on the city of Philadelphia, and if you just move your eyes across the screen, looking at temperature, where deeper reds are higher temperatures, tree canopy, where deeper greens mean more tree canopy, and deeper browns mean higher incidence of climate-related health impacts in cities. And what you can see, they're inverses, right? More trees mean lower temperatures, less trees means higher temperatures. And the impact on people's health and the exacerbation of existing health impacts grows as you have less trees. And then, similarly, the people that are at greater risk, in the same way, if you move your eyes across, there's less trees often, not always, but often in places where there's a higher percentage of people in poverty. There's a higher percentage of people of color. And we think that's wrong. And that's why we created Tree Equity Score. We think of Tree Equity Score as a tool that supports the work that you're already doing, right? This is just to provide a resource that supports the missions that many of you have that are on this call right now, or provide additional resources for something that you aren't able to do because you don't have them right now. It's a baseline for understanding and engaging with your communities to hopefully inspire and educate, advocate for new investment in tree canopy, implement new policies, whether that's tree ordinances, setting municipal goals, or refining objectives to existing urban forestry programs in cities. So I'm gonna take just a couple of minutes to just talk about how we create how we build Tree Equity Score. And then we'll dig into a little bit more of the fun stuff after that. So the baseline is identifying a tree canopy gap. We take a baseline target based on information from the Forest Service that identifies whether you're in an ecoregion that's forested, grassland, or desert, instead of baseline target, because these goals need to be achievable, right? We want them to be ambitious, but it needs to be possible. We're not going to get 60% tree canopy cover in the desert, for example. But we want to make sure that people have access to trees for what's possible. Similarly, we make an adjustment to that based on population density. The reason being, more people means more impervious surface, more buildings, less space to actually plant trees. We still want to focus on those places, but again, we want this to be an achievable goal. And this sort of is loosely based on some research that was done by Rob McDonald at the Nature Conservancy, sort of showing that sort of difference in access to trees depending on the density of the population in the area. And then, of course, we need to compare that with what's there right now. And I'll just pause for a moment because I think it's important for us to note we couldn't have done this. We couldn't have done this for the entire country if we didn't have this really incredible data set donated to us by a company called Earth Define. Their urban tree atlas is really incredible data that's taking advantage of the latest science, AI technology to really make satellite imagery, all the amazing satellite imagery that's coming out and improving every day in this world, making it actionable. And they've created a really great data set and donated to us aggregate data so we could calculate tree equity scores for every urbanized area in the entire country. So let me just take a step back here. So now we have a tree canopy gap. We have a target and we have existing canopy, and the difference between those two is the tree canopy gap. So we combine that with a measure of priority. So we have we looked at a lot of different equity indices that have come out around the country, including, EJ Screen is the one that I tend to come back to. We didn't quite match up with that, but we had 6 specific equally weighted characteristics that we measured. Income, looking at people in poverty, unemployment, race, so all people of color, age, seniors and children combined, and health, using pulling out several measures from the CDC's Places Index to create a sort of climate health index We could equally combine all of those into what we call a priority index. And then we combine those two things, that measure of need, the tree canopy gap, and the measure of priority, to create a score. It's a single value, one score. These are normalized data for each individual municipality between 0 and 100, where a score of 100 means that a neighborhood does not have a tree canopy gap. The lower the score, the higher the priority for planting. So a larger tree canopy gap and a higher priority is going to give you a lower score. And we'll sort of show, I'll have a slide showing how that works in a little bit. But the result is democratized data. All of these tools are available right now at treeequityscore.org for every urbanized area in the continental United States right now, but hopefully by this summer we'll have Hawaii and Alaska and some other places as well. That's over 150,000 neighborhoods. When I say neighborhood, I mean census block group. That's the unit of neighborhood that we use. So over 150,000 in over 4,000 cities. And an important note is that all of this data is downloadable from the site right now. There's some caveats there due to our licensing agreement with Earth Define for the tree canopy cover percentage. But in general, we provide every neighborhood downloadable right now from treeequityscore.org. So here's sort of in general what it looks like. I just pulled out from the city of Providence 3 individual block groups or neighborhoods. If you look over on the left-hand side, there's a neighborhood with a score of 89. It still has a reasonably large tree canopy gap, actually, of 15%. So that means we need to increase tree canopy cover by 15% in that census block group in order to achieve tree equity. But it's prioritized based on the priority index. So the priority index is between 0 and 1, and the closer to 1 that you get, the higher the priority is. This is a relatively low priority compared to the other neighborhoods in Providence. So that combination yields a score of 89 for that neighborhood. On the right-hand side, you'll see 2 other lower scoring block groups or neighborhoods. The one further south has a score of 55. It has a lower tree canopy gap actually than the neighborhood further north. But it has a higher priority index. And that's what sort of drives that score being slightly lower. I want to be clear, in our view, we need trees in all 3 of these neighborhoods. But if we're prioritizing, we would say that neighborhood to the south center of town would be the highest priority, followed by the neighborhood to the north center. This is sort of a starting place for prioritization. And that's a lot of what Tree Equity Score can do for you as you're looking at where to target new tree planting in the city. Okay, so our results are we have 2 types of applications that we offer. The Tree Equity Score Explorer, available, like I said, right now from treeequityscore.org, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes reviewing that tool. I'll be demoing in just a couple minutes. The point of that tool is it sets a national standard. It's nationwide, just CONUS right now, but eventually all of the country and potentially actually other parts of the world, as we've received a lot of interest there too. It gets down to the census block group level. That's our neighborhood measure. Aggregates canopy, provides benefit estimation for cities based on tree equity goals, and provides reports at the city, district, and state level. We also have a deep dive tool that we work with cities on a case-by-case basis and fundraise together that goes a couple of levels deeper. You can do it, we'll build it for a city. We built one for the state of Rhode Island, a smaller state, or it could be a region, a metro region. It gets down to the parcel level. So we can actually identify, we're looking at high-res canopy. We can get down to what's the percentage canopy on an individual parcel. And allows you to create custom project level scenarios, planting trees on parcels or within the right of way in individual block groups to help you achieve your tree equity goals. These are custom reports associated with this with similar benefits estimation, but just a step deeper. And the important thing there is that this is a locally driven process. Stakeholder co-created with us. Additional data is, we incorporate additional local data, et cetera. It's a really powerful tool. We're not going to go over that today. We just wanted to note that there is sort of that sort of additional level of detail that we provide. So I talked a little bit about the uses for advocacy and others, but the Explorer, is a education and policy tool. It's available for, like I said, for every urbanized area in the country. You can test your assumptions, and I'll show a little bit about what that means in a second. But then that deep dive tool of TESA as well, that allows you to explore planning opportunities, compare potential scenarios, et cetera. So those are the tools. I'm just going to briefly just talk about what's next, because one thing to note is this is an organizational commitment. We've made the commitment that we will be updating tree equity score in perpetuity, as long as people want, as long as somebody wants us to be creating it still. We will be creating and updating and improving in perpetuity. So some of the innovations we're going to be working on is creating and working towards creating AI-based tree canopy cover for the entire country that is freely available. So sort of taking a step further from what Earth Define has donated to us and trying to get it to a place where we can provide high resolution, accurate canopy cover to everyone in urban places, in lieu of high resolution LiDAR analysis that can be really expensive. We're building tree equity score analyzers in lots of cities across the country, and we're going to be building them in many more. Like I said, we're going to be expanding a little bit. We're going to be providing additional improved user support with a detailed user guide and example use cases. We're going to be working on piloting it in even smaller cities. So the cities, we look at urbanized areas now. We'll hopefully be adding urban clusters, sort of those smaller urban spaces that the census defines, and providing additional tools and analysis modules as well. So I am going to stop now and then just take a moment to, let's see how much time I have, about 10 minutes to do a quick demo of the tool. So this is the Tree Equity Score website. You can get to it, like I said, from treeequityscore.org. And you can search for any city that we offer within the application. I'm just going to click on one of our featured places right now in Detroit. So that'll take us right into the application and focus on the city of Detroit. If you wanted to go to, like I showed in my slides, Philadelphia, you can do that too, and that'll take you again directly to the city of Philadelphia. Since I'm here, I'll focus here for now for the demo. So it is, if you've used a map-based tool before, it will look similar. We've spent a lot of time and effort trying to make this as simple as possible and focused as possible. So what you see right now is Tree Equity Score. Shows you a legend in the bottom right-hand side that sort of shows the range of colors. Again, the more orange colors in this case mean a lower score, higher priority. Closer to the more green scores get closer to 100, the lower the priority. And as you drag your mouse over any spot on the map, you'll get to see the score for that individual neighborhood. So you can also explore the data in different ways. You could look at what the aggregate tree canopy cover percentage is for every neighborhood. And again, as you drag your mouse over, you'll see the measure that you've selected. And you can do anything, the same thing for any of the priority indicators and a couple of other resources as well. So we do have, where the data is available, information on redlining and the home loan rankings that were a big driver of racial injustice in this country. And you can do that sort of comparison and sort of see what might have been one of the reasons why there was less investment in an individual neighborhood. It sort of gives you that sort of baseline starting place to dig a little bit deeper. You can also filter the data. So if you just wanted to identify the neighborhoods that have a tree equity score below 80 or below 75, it'll filter that information and just focus. So you can just focus on those neighborhoods that have those scores. And again, the same thing, if you wanted to look at those neighborhoods that had a really low tree canopy cover percentage, you could do the same thing. Whatever sort of makes it a little bit more flexible based on the work that you're doing. The same thing for any of the priority indicators as well. That's just sort of base data exploration, but you can go a step deeper. So if you select one of the neighborhoods, so I just selected this one that has a score of 72, you can see over here on the left-hand side a sort of summary for what's going on in that neighborhood. It shows the score, where it ranks within the city. It might, that font might look a little bit small to you, but you can see it ranks 1,160th out of over 1,300 block groups in the city. You can sort of see how the priority index is calculated. This is maybe my favorite part of this application, that this radar chart. So this septagon here, the more it's filled out with pink, the higher the priority is for that city. So it goes from the lowest values out to whatever the highest value is for that city. So 87% people of color in this neighborhood, that's one of the highest values of people of color in the city. Not the highest, but one of the highest. And then we have sort of where it sits within its tree canopy cover goal down here with this little thermometer. So based on population density and the region it's in, there's a tree canopy cover goal of 32%. There's a current canopy cover of 9%. So that standard difference, we would say that there's a lot of work to do in terms of increasing tree canopy cover in this neighborhood. So the next sort of step of detail from there is to actually look at the city reports. And it gets a little bit more interactive here as well. So I mentioned sort of testing assumptions. So I clicked on that city report. You could do the same thing for states or for congressional districts as well. It gives you a general summary of what's going on in that, in this case, municipality. So in the city of Philadelphia, the population, the overall percentages of our equity or priority indices within this area, a couple of charts. So the distribution of tree equity scores. So there's, in this case in Philadelphia, there's 41 block groups. I don't know if you can see when I hover over that part of the chart, there's 41 block groups in the city of Philadelphia that have a score of less than 63. And as you hover over the others, it'll summarize those for you. There's tree canopy percentage comparisons versus some of our priority indices. So what we have right now is tree canopy percentage versus people of color on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. So what we've seen in general across the country is as you increase the percentage of people of color in a neighborhood across a city, that their tree canopy percentage goes down. And in Philadelphia, that is the case. It's not the case in all cities. And that's another point of further exploration. How or why is that the case in places? So if you are in a block group where the vast majority of the population are people of color, you're likely to have 1.5% less than average tree canopy cover in the city, but also about 4.5% less than those neighborhoods that have less people of color. Similarly, for people in poverty, the same kind of downward trend. As you have more people in poverty, you're going to have less trees. It's the same scenario. And maybe even the most unsurprising is temperature, right? Trees and temperature are very closely inversely related. So so that's sort of another sort of way to dive a little bit deeper into the data for your city. We also have a way to sort of estimate the benefits. So I scrolled down and we have this little slider bar here that you can set a target. So let's say in your city, you wanted to identify and target tree planting in all neighborhoods that have a score of less than 80. So it'll tell you that there are 389 census block groups or neighborhoods that have a score of less than 80. In order to get every one of them up to at least a score of 80, we would need to plant 163,000 trees about. What that would do would increase tree canopy by 3% across the city and provide all of these additional ecosystem service values. Carbon sequestration, air quality, stormwater, and adding all of that up comes to about a $3.1 million ecosystem service benefit on an annual basis. It also supports jobs. These aren't, almost 1,200 full-time jobs in perpetuity. These could be some full-time jobs, some seasonal jobs, but it is an economic generator is the point here. And this is sort of calculated via research that we commissioned to identify like how is urban forestry an economic generator in cities, and what we found was it is. It does create jobs. It creates new areas of potential expertise in urban forestry and a demand for it. So I'm going to pause there. I think I'm just about at time or close to at time. If we have a couple of seconds, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that folks have. But thank you again for having me. Really excited about the work, and please follow up with me if you have any additional questions even after this panel.
All right, well, thank you, Chris. We really appreciate that. It was very interesting and enlightening, because it is a challenge for me to do any kind of a program, and you made it a little bit easier for me. I also want to start by just thanking all the panelists. Chris is going to join us for the audience questions and answers after we have questions and answers with the next panelists. And I also want to thank the staff for putting this on. It's a lot of work to do these moderated sessions on computers. Very challenging. I'm glad I'm not the one who is responsible for it. And of course, thanks audience for joining us. I know you have lunches to go to and lots of things to do, but it's a really important topic, and we hope you can stick around. And before we get started, want to wish everybody a happy Georgia Arbor Day. Yes, Arbor Day is Friday. Hope y'all can go out and plant trees. Whatever state you're in, for Georgia's Arbor Day, can find enough reasons to plant a tree. So enjoy our Georgia Arbor Day. So before we get started, I thought it would be good for us to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about the panels, their backgrounds, and the organization's background that they represent. And I will start it by talking a little bit about Trees Atlanta. We started in 1985, obviously in Atlanta, Georgia. We are in about 11 cities now doing tree planting work and restoration. Currently we have about 50 staff, and during the growing season, we actually more than double that with seasonal workers, but also our youth programs, both our camp program and our youth workforce program. This past year, we had 28,000 volunteer hours. At the top of our game, we had 40,000 hours before COVID, and we're going to get back up to that very shortly. And lastly, our tree equity score was 91. Now with Atlanta, With that said, if you look around downtown is 43, and the neighborhoods all adjacent to downtown are somewhere between 47 and 52. And most of those neighborhoods are neighborhoods with lower income and minority of people of color. So that's a little bit about Atlanta and where we are at. And now if we can have Natalie jump on and talk a little bit about Trees for Houston.
Hey, thank you, Greg. Okay, so hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on here today. I'm Natalie Jones. I'm the Projects and Volunteer Coordinator with Trees for Houston. Trees for Houston is a nonprofit organization that serves the greater Houston communities. So if you don't know too much about Houston, is we are a very, very large city, not just in population size, but also area of land. So we as an organization go as far out to the coast as Galveston, up north to the Woodlands. I know some of these cities make no sense to some people, but it is a large area that we are serving. So this allows us as an organization to plant and distribute many, many, many trees to our communities. And, you know, we've been around for about 40 years. We started out as mainly just as street trees in a rather affluent neighborhood. And we have grown as the organization really in maybe the last 15 to 20 years, we have really expanded into going to schools in these underserved communities and really spreading our mission to not just street trees, but actually like more ecological benefits. And we are continuing to grow. We have actually in the past 5 years come up from 10,000 trees to now doing 20,000 trees a year. And then this year, our goal is 70,000. So we are really making way using these tree equity models and talking with other municipalities and really just getting our work, getting the mission out there, encouraging others, encouraging the community to hear our voices and want to be involved, and so that they can help us do this work as well.
Thank you, Natalie. Next, we have Allie Lakehart from Trees for Seattle.
Hi, you all. My name is Allie Lakehart, and Trees for Seattle is it's kind of a fun organization. I actually am a city employee, and so it's our urban forestry in Seattle is quite a robust effort. We have so many incredible partner organizations that we support the urban forest in our beautiful city. We do love our Emerald City moniker, our nickname. And, you know, Trees for Seattle is an umbrella kind of department, if you will. We work interdepartmentally. We actually have 14 different departments in the city that are working on urban forestry. And then we have, you know, many, many partner organizations, community-based organizations, and mostly nonprofits. And, you know, basically the Trees for Seattle, you know, kind of our focus is just, we really want a healthy urban forest in Seattle. We want it to be growing, and we want to have a commitment to that. So we want to support and we want to empower our community in the care of the urban forest. You know, it doesn't really work we're in our opinion to just have the city caring for this place. We actually want to encourage our residents and to have them to feel welcome, have them to feel like they are, I've been using this term, practitioners, you know, they're working in practice with us, and that we are all kind of doing it together. And that, you know, we are also helping people just tap into their love of nature and their love of, you know, we are a city surrounded by mountains, surrounded by water, surrounded by orca and salmon. And so just making those connections that trees and salmon are connected. Look it up if you don't know, it's pretty cool. And so we do have like a core team who meet, you know, regularly and make some, you know, planning and urban forestry decisions. Like I mentioned, we have 14 different departments, and then I want, you know, thousands of volunteers, hundreds of community-based organizations that work with us in some way through the Green Seattle Partnership, Trees for Neighborhoods. We have lots of work going on. We do a lot of urban forest restoration in our parks. But my little team at Trees for Seattle is 3 people. And so we kind of each have our own pieces that we do. We do tree walks. So we have many tree walks. We have a tree walk app where you can just learn about the trees in your neighborhood. And we also do Trees for Neighborhoods. We actually plant very large trees in schools and with people. Residents plant them in their yards and then in right of ways. And then also we just do a lot of volunteer stewardship with people in spaces. And I think for us, tree equity, this tree equity score we have a score of 91. That was the question I was supposed to answer. And we look at it and we have a lot of beautiful forests in Seattle. And I think the other thing that we have learned and we have been focused on canopy in Seattle, I would say at least 20-25 years, way before my time. But I think what we are really looking at now, especially with urban heat being so, I don't know if you were following, I know my Vancouver people are on the call, they remember heat dome. We had this heat dome effect and we had incredibly high temperatures, 117 degrees in our county. And so that the connection between trees and health, I think the connection between trees and of course equity is so important to that, and like making sure that we have an equitably distributed urban forest is vital. And so that has been where this conversation has gone. I'll answer more questions about this, but I think for us, the tool is so important for prioritization. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I just really appreciate all of the incredible people we work with, and our little staff of 3. We do as much as we can, but we are, like I said, we have so many organizations that we work with, and then so many other departments that in the city that we are in community with, really, and all of our residents. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Ali. Next, we have Erica Fickman from the City of Philadelphia. She's a community forestry manager.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Erica Smith-Fitchman. I am the Community Forestry Manager at Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. Similar to Ali, I am a city employee at the Parks and Recreation Department, but we are a small team within a large organization. The City Parks and Rec Department was founded in 1867. But my small community forestry team, which we essentially operate under the name of Tree Philly, has been around for about a decade. So our community forestry mission is to empower Philadelphia community members to enrich life in their neighborhoods through the planting, care of, and connection with trees. And we use the principles and practices of environmental justice to reverse the city's unequal and declining tree canopy by providing free, accessible yard trees and nurturing relationships between neighbors, institutions, and the land we live on. So you can see that tree equity is a huge part of the community forestry work that we do. The City of Philadelphia is a huge, the Parks and Rec Department is a huge department with hundreds of employees. But our staff is 4 full-time and 1 seasonal, and we are actually a shared staff between the Parks and Rec Department and the Fairmount Park Conservancy, which is a nonprofit partner. So one of the things that's so exciting about this conversation is that not only do we focus on tree equity in our community forestry work, but we are at the end of a strategic plan effort that we've done here in Philadelphia. For the last 2 years or so, we've been working on a 10-year plan for the equitable planting and care of Philadelphia's urban forest. And we've been running that up. We've been using environmental justice and community engagement as some of the core values that we're operating with to gather information from people to inform the plan. So we've been doing a lot of looking at tree equity in our city and doing some of our own prioritization, but it has come in parallel with the conversation that American Forest has been leading about tree equity, and all of the conversation that's happening nationally has really been an amazing boost to what we've been doing locally. So our score, I think, is 84, as Chris showed you in the intro, but it does range from 47 to 100. So quite a range there of scores. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Erica. Next, we're going to have Danielle Crumrine. She's the Executive Director of Trees Pittsburgh. And even though I messed up that name, I've known her for about 12 or 13 years. So thanks, Danielle, for being tolerant of my inability to speak.
Yes, Greg, so happy to be here. Tree Pittsburgh, we've been around for 15 years now, and our mission is to protect and restore our urban forest throughout the city of Pittsburgh, throughout Allegheny County, which is about over 1 million people in our county. And we do that through tree planting, tree care, education, advocacy, and just recently added land conservation to the mix. Just understanding the true need and actually preserving, acres of land. But we were born out of citizen concern for the well-being of our city's trees. And it was the Pittsburgh Shade Tree Commission that actually started the organization. And it was all rooted in the street tree inventory that the city did back in 2005, which again, we talk about the power of data. It was that data. And, if you know our history as a Rust Belt city, we lost over half of our population in the 70s and 80s when the steel mills closed down. So we still had a lot of the old city infrastructure, but not the tax base to care for it. So that first street tree inventory was really powerful. It provided the data that we needed to form this argument for more resources. So we are an independent nonprofit, but again, started by the city, and we continue to work very closely. And you'll meet my city forester here in a second. But we, after the street tree inventory, again, understanding the power of the data, we helped the city put together its first urban forest master plan about 10 years ago now. And that's when we were able to get that tree canopy data back when it was a lot more expensive than it is today and time consuming, to slice and dice the data and look at the equity issue specifically. And we even did that with the street tree inventory, which I could talk a little bit more about later. But the equity issue we've been working on for a while, and I will echo Erica, just how excited I am that there's this much momentum behind it now, and that we're talking about it here today. And there's, groups of us that, when we have our conferences, this is a topic. So it's just really exciting. Our score is 87, but we do have neighborhoods in the 30s, and like Philly, 100. So it's quite a range. At Tree Pittsburgh, we're about 20 people strong, más o menos, depending on the time of year and the season. But we, like Natalie, are growing. And I feel like every year there's a new face at Tree Pittsburgh, which is really, really exciting. And we're so grateful. But I will turn it over to Lisa Chaffee, our city forester, to introduce herself.
Hello. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Lisa Chaffee. I'm the city forester for the city of Pittsburgh, Department of Public Works. We're a specialty division that falls under Public Works. We're, of course, in Pittsburgh, which is in Western Pennsylvania. And my department, we're responsible for all the trees as forester. Every tree in our city falls under our jurisdiction that's in the rights of ways and our parks and our trails. New greenways that were just recently added, lots and lots of area to cover. Of course, our forestry department responds to storm damage along with our routine maintenance, trees and, pruning, removals, and tree plantings that we work hand in glove with our partner organizations with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy Tree Vitalize program, which Philly's well aware of. And of course, the tree tender program that helps us with our citizens, helping out with doing our training, pruning, and things like that to get our trees off to a good start. We in our department is very small. We're very powerful though. We have less than 20 people, 8 pruners and several drivers, a few laborers to get all this work done. So we're a mean green machine. You know, we have really dedicated people that I feel, you know, besides just doing the routine maintenance, are really part of this really amazing urban forestry program that we have here at the city. And I try to remind them of that every day so that they don't just get caught up in just the routine maintenance, that they really contribute to, you know, our overall health of our forest. And sometimes we don't get to plant trees, but I make a point during Arbor Day, which for Pennsylvania is in April, that our team at least participates in some tree planting projects so that they can, you know, have that side of the work of it too, and be able to drive by the trees and say that they, you know, planted those trees so many years ago or whatever. And they're just not just out doing the mundane maintenance. We have been working closely with our Shade Tree Commission. I am a liaison on the commission, and like Danielle had mentioned, we are tasked with, the commission's tasked with the street trees and making sure that they're healthy and safe and equitable, and that from time to time, forestry depends on the Shade Tree Commission for funding for equipment and for our inventory and for tree planting special projects and things like that. But most recently, our commission was tasked with developing an equitable street tree strategy, which sort of segues into all this information on social equity, you know, where we can prioritize our tree planting efforts. How do we, you know, partner with our organizations to highlight those areas of need and really, you know, roll up our sleeves and use our data that we have as far as our street tree inventory and looking at needs throughout the neighborhoods. And I'm very excited, you know, to be working with all of you on this effort. I think the city was sort of a little bit ahead of the game, you know, that we were sort of working in tandem at the same time American Forest was. But I think having the data really validates for Pittsburgh that we're on the right track, and that it really legitimizes all the work that we're doing on a national effort. And I'm really excited about possibilities, and here to participate in the conference, answer questions, and sort of tag team a little bit with Danielle. So thank you all for having me today.
Thank you. We really appreciate you joining us. And thank the entire panel. We really appreciate you being here for this really important conversation. And just as a reminder to everybody out there, we are tree experts. We live and breathe trees. We know that equity and tree equity is very important, but we aren't equity experts. This is something that we are working on and getting better at, and know that it's something that it's growing in importance for all of our organizations. So to start off, I have a question. I think I'm gonna start with you, Danielle. I was wondering what your thoughts are on the tree equity score and how this data can help your organization specifically in the work that you've already been doing, but also maybe help other organizations and cities that may not have the same amount of resources or staff to work on it.
Yeah, so, you know, some of the folks at American Forests, I was knocking on their door as soon as I heard they were working on this. I was just so excited to get the data. And I'd mentioned we've been working on tree equity data for quite a while, but I think, like Lisa said, this really validated what we were already working on by, you know, a national organization with an excellent reputation. So that's one part of it. But really, I think just shining the light on the issue as they have on this national or international stage, putting out the piece, and that was at the New York Times, right? Ian had put the piece in the paper, which all of our organizations had that and were able to share it and maybe respond in our own local media, newspapers or what have you. So I think they just really, they shined a big light on the issue. And you know, moreover, the cities that don't have the data that maybe Pittsburgh or Philly has, and you know, like I said, we've put a ton of money into this over the last decade. And now cities across the country can go to this website and have the tool accessible there and just hit the ground running. And that's just worth, you know, $1 million. And I hope, and I know, in fact, that American Forests will be there to help them leverage the data in any way that cities are going to need it. So I just think it's going to benefit everybody at the end.
Allie, did you have something that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's you know, in and itself, it's an equity issue, right? Like we as larger cities, we have some capacity for this. You know, we have had an urban forest management plan for many years in Seattle. We just redid one. You know, we've been talking about equity, we've been looking at this. You know, I know we had some conversations before this call, and I was saying that, you know, it's not very long ago that I would have to like take the, you know, EJ screen map and then plug it in with our you know, our Canopy map and like look at all these pieces together, and now it's all consolidated in one place. I think that's really incredible. I have worked with smaller cities in King County, Burien, and SeaTac and Des Moines, and so doing some of this work for them was just pulling data from all of these places. And it exactly, Danielle, it was a lot of time. We had some, thankfully, actually I was working with the Port of Seattle, and we had some grant funding and things to do that, but it was really expensive. It was time consuming. So I completely agree with you, Danielle. I think it's just putting it all in a place. And then hopefully, you know, as well, some of our smaller urban areas are getting and seeing this for the first time, because without funding and, you know, without, you know, tax base and grants and things like that, you really don't have an easy way to do this. And so I think that's another, for us, it's incredible to have a place where we can refer people, where a lot of these, you know, pieces are together. I think it's kind of the first time that I know of for that. So that really helps it. And it's also like that baseline data. And then, you know, you can pull in all of these other pieces. And I just, you know, really appreciate some of like the temperature scores, you know, and how these things interact. It really paints a picture. I think that's the other thing I know we all were talking about. It's easier to communicate when you can illustrate it.
And it's hard to deny it when you see the trend across the country. It really makes it hard to deny that it's a real issue.
Did any of the other panelists want to add on to that? All right. Well, I'm going to jump into this next question. And so what are some of the methods that your cities or your organizations are using to actually work on some of the equity issues, tree cover in your particular city? And why don't we start with you, Erica, start off that question.
Sure. So in Philadelphia, we have been able to do a tree canopy assessment a few times now using LiDAR data. So three-dimensional data, so we can really distinguish where trees are versus the two-dimensional data of the past, which would sometimes confuse trees with shadows of buildings and things like that. So we've been able to use that high-tech data since 2008 or so to see where our trees are and where they are not. So we do have tree canopy in the city that ranges from some neighborhoods with 3 or 4% up to other neighborhoods with over 45% and more. So one of the things that we did when we did our initial tree canopy assessment was that we realized that one of the largest areas of potential for tree canopy growth was in yards. And we created our yard tree giveaway program, which is where we began to talk about Tree Philly. And that has kind of become our community forestry program in general. So it started out as a yard tree program, and we continue to give away yard trees. And we actually have had we've had so many extremely talented people come through our program. And we had someone a few years ago who did an environmental justice assessment of where we're giving away trees, doing a proximity of the tree equity score in our city. And we've been using that internally for a number of years to determine where we're giving away trees, who we're partnering with, trying to lower the barrier of entry to those tree giveaways by translating materials, partnering very closely with community groups who know the best way to get information out to their communities. And the pandemic actually offered an additional way of increasing the accessibility of that by forcing us to create a delivery program. So now we've added door-to-door delivery to our yard tree giveaway program. So that's one thing we've been working on for the past decade or so. We have also, as I said, been working on a strategic plan to get to create a roadmap for the next 10 years of how to increase our tree canopy and to care for it equitably across the city. So we did our own internal prioritization of the city using very similar data sets to the tree equity score. And we've used the highest priority neighborhoods to in the planning process to make sure that the plan itself represents the concerns of people in those neighborhoods. So we had a number of different tools we used to make sure we were hearing from those people, including creating a 6-week paid program for residents in those communities to essentially be ambassadors to the plan from their communities. So we've had about 22 people from 5 different neighborhoods over the last year or so do interviews with their neighbors and friends, 62 interviews, and we transcribed all of those and included them in the results of the outreach that we did to inform the plan. So right now we are working on creating what those strategies are to move forward, but we were very intentional to make sure that the plan we are creating reflected the concerns of the people in those highest priority neighborhoods. And we were really lucky to have some support at the very beginning, of course, from Tree Pittsburgh, which did their master plan over a decade ago at this point and really set the kind of standard for what that type of thing could look like. So it's nice to be here with such a panel of folks that I know that I could call up later too, to be like, Allie, you were saying that thing. I want to know more about that. So
Erica, I'm personally curious about where did funding come to do that particular study? Was it a city just put the money together, or is that from foundations? And
to do the tree canopy assessment?
Well, the community work, all the community work that you had done.
Yeah. So the tree canopy assessments we've done that were kind of like the first step. You can't really decide what your strategy is until you know what you have. And so we as a city actually collect LiDAR data in some of the other departments for other decisions that happen. So this is another example of larger cities having kind of an advantage, right? Because I did not have to pay to collect the data that we use to analyze, but that is a really big expense. So we paid for the analysis with a combination of a corporate sponsorship from TD Bank, which funds a lot of our community forestry work, and support from the state DCNR from the Tree Vitalize program. So that went into the analysis itself, like the data analysis, and then the planning process itself, which included this very in-depth community outreach phase, was funded through a combination of foundations, corporate sponsorship, and again, the state.
Interesting and complex, like all funding for nonprofits.
Yes, it is. Difficult to track down and make people actually pay invoices at times.
Right. Natalie, what about you? What do you think are some methods that you are using to address the tree equity issues in your city?
Yeah, so we're like everyone else. We're taking the data that has been collected and we're focusing and keying in on these specific neighborhoods and communities. We don't not plant in places that don't necessarily need as many trees as well. We kind of we'll do it all over. But whenever we have someone that's coming to us that doesn't have any idea, someone that has funding that's available, and they just want to plant trees or they want to give away trees and they come to us for that, we're going to dedicate our resources to these underserved communities. And so that's how we're getting in there, and we're really trying to make a difference. I say trying because that's not always the case. Sometimes it is lack of planting space. I mean, it's not, we can't do it all alone. We need help from other organizations to go in there and making sure that we are creating parks in other areas. We can be the tree source for that, and we're happy to, because we do have the means, we have the skill set to come in there and make the plans for it. And we make it easier on other organizations like the city, who might have to jump through a lot more hoops to get the trees planted, whereas we can come in and we kind of just say, you ready to go? And we'll plant these trees. So we're meeting with the right people, we're talking to people, we're getting our name out there, we're cold calling people even. I mean, we'll do whatever we can to make sure that we're getting in these communities and trying our best to do what we do best, which is plant trees.
Thank you. So Danielle, I know that you've already talked a lot about it, but specifically, what other work have y'all done working, and Lisa, you jump into to address equity issues before even this, like you said, before this work was done? Can you address that a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll lead in, and then Lisa can pick up with the current effort. But previously, over the last decade, right off the bat, when we had the street tree data, we were able to do some real simple analysis and looking at, there are 90 so neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, and looking at street trees per capita, for example, by neighborhood. And there were some neighborhoods, or like a wealthier neighborhood, that was one street tree for every 5 people. And then we had neighborhoods that were one street tree for every 21 people. So when you think about, there's just so many different ways to look at this. And, street trees are in people's face. They affect people's everyday life. So that's a whole other analysis that you can look at just with your street tree data. And then, of course, we had the tree canopy data, which, like Natalie just said, that really drives where we focus our resources. And Lisa, if you want to talk now about the most current effort, that's a partnership with the city.
Sure. So, we have using same data sets that most cities have with urban tree canopy studies, but we really rely heavily upon our support with our nonprofits, because the city just doesn't have the resources to dive into that so much. But when we had worked on our own equity plan, one of the things that we did was try to get to the top 10 neighborhoods of need that we thought, were really where we could really focus our attention. And even those top neighborhoods, we can only deal with one neighborhood at a time. And we look to our nonprofit partners to help us, with implementing things. But one of the big lessons, though, for me as a forester and a takeaway is that, the whole concept around procedural justice, about this time around making sure that the neighborhood groups are actively they're participating in the decision making and where the trees are going, and listening to the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful, I always say, and taking ownership and responsibility for issues around sidewalks. Because let's face it, I always say, it's a 50-50 shot. You're either going to get a person that really had a great experience with a tree or had a negative experience with a tree. And it's my job to, bring you to the green side, so to speak, and just, I think, taking ownership of where the city went wrong, and making sure that we don't make those same mistakes again, and making sure that the resources that are available to folks, like calling our 311, for example, just to report, a tree needs pruned, or giving them information about a sidewalk reimbursement program from, an experience they may have had where a tree damaged a sidewalk. So I think all of those tools are very helpful. And I think it's been, it took a little longer than I expected to really get to the key people in the neighborhood that would help facilitate meetings and, getting the word out about trees, because it's not always necessarily those tree rock stars. We're trying to get to the other parts of the community so that the people that so that everybody has an equal say, about what we're doing. So for me, it's been really good as far as just sort of like making sure that those things are just at the surface again. And like Danielle said, that's always been part of the strategies through the Urban Forest Master Plan that we've been working on. But this is really letting us hone in specifically to those neighborhoods and rolling our sleeves up and making sure we're connecting with the right people.
We have a grant proposal out there right now for these 10 neighborhoods that Lisa's talking about, that if we get the funding, we'll have money to do the first 5 little mini neighborhood forestry plans, using a lot of the lessons from Philly, Erica's effort to like do those interviews, get all of that feedback, and make sure that everyone has some input into the process. So I'll know in March if we get the money, but hopefully we could take it to the next level with Lisa.
That's interesting, Danielle. We actually have done a master plan for downtown and are looking at the neighborhoods, which are also have low tree canopy in Atlanta, to see if we can do planting plans for them as well. And of course, doing a lot of the outreach that needs to go along with that. Allie, can you want to give us some of your experiences? I know that you're going to have to jump off a little earlier. So just a reminder, what the question is what are some of the methods that you are using to address the tree equity issue? And you're on mute.
Thanks. I just wanted to say, I really love hearing about the storytelling. I think that's something that's so incredibly important is, and like Lisa, just holding the truths to people. Yes, that's something you experienced, and I'm sorry. And for us, it's a lot of restitution. It's a lot of amending past wrongs. And so I think that, really just showing up authentically and being and listening. It's so great to hear all of your stories, honestly. I think we're doing similar work in Seattle. 72% of our canopy is on private land. So it's on actually residential land. So that's something that's really hit home for us in the past, really, 20 years. But yes, right now, that's what Trees for Seattle really is about our residents and helping them. How do you care for trees? We have incredible, invasive species issues. English ivy climbs into treetops. It really does choke trees. It removes their ability to photosynthesize. We have these gorgeous conifers and they're extremely expensive to maintain. Some of those things we haven't quite solved for, but we are trying to be inventive in that. And we're trying to listen to communities. So a lot of us, a lot of our work is also keeping mature trees. Yes, we are definitely planting. We did a full delivery model too, Erica. COVID has taught us that we can do things we never thought we could do. And honestly, that it's not as expensive as our bias thought it was going to be, that it actually ended up being not any more expensive than we've done in the past. And it's more equitable. So I think, and just like Natalie was saying, prioritizing neighborhoods, looking at the data, really coming up with, where we want to make sure that we're investing when opportunities arise or grants come into play. We have those answers of those 10 places that we want to most prioritize. And then for us, the other piece that we've been really working, we have just had COVID has given us a pause on volunteer efforts, and we were where the coronavirus, came into, we were one of the first places that we had active COVID. And so we've been really cautious about volunteering, but it's given us time to pause. And we have done a racial equity toolkit around our volunteer program. We have a really big commitment to racial equity in Seattle, and we're not there yet. And so we're trying to really make those connections, like I said, between health and trees and, even health and volunteering and what that means and who has time to volunteer and, all of those pieces. And so doing more paid partnerships than we ever have, where people are actually getting, paid for their work, they're paid for their volunteer time or what would have been volunteer time. And then, I think the other piece for us is looking into the future, which is kind of scary. We're really trying to look at pests and pest readiness, because I had a fantastic intern, Liu Zhang, who helped us and kind of did some mapping for us about where our pest areas of most concern are. And of course, they're in these same neighborhoods where we have low canopy and high heat. And so just really making sure that we're thinking creatively about what we plant. We're thinking about climate change. We're trying to think about, we're planning for 100 years, planting and planning for 100 years from now. A tree is not like us. They live a very long time, especially some of our large Northwest conifers. And I mentioned some of the other like ecological benefits. What does it mean when you have species that can live a really long time and they get really large, but is that true with our changing climate? And so I think those are like, when we put all those things together, I think someone said earlier, I think it was Danielle, that, like we're really getting this picture, and that, it also then helps us to get grants. It makes it undeniable that we have work to do. We know where we want to do it. And so, and then forming relationships and being really trying to show up with authenticity, but then also relying so much, I think Lisa said, on our partner organizations, and building partnership and building up those partner organizations with funding, with helping them apply for grants with support. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And I do apologize, I have to run. I am Trees for Seattle at seattle.gov. It literally will come to me. So I'll put that in the chat. And if anyone has any questions for us, I'd love to talk to anyone. It was so nice to meet all of you though. Thank you so much. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So she'd addressed a little bit about kind of a little bit of lessons learned when working on the equity and tree equity issues. I think that's something that's really worth sharing. We have a lot of different organizations throughout who are on this participating, I guess, or as listening to this presentation. What are some of the lessons that you have learned specifically around equity, trees and equity, that would be really worth sharing? Because it's always great to skip from what other people have done incorrectly, or things that were positive that, just a lesson like, well, that worked really well, even though I thought it was gonna be more challenging than it was, like we had just heard. And why don't we start with Erica on this one?
Sure. Well, I would kind of build on some of the things that everyone's been saying and what Lisa was saying before about kind of being honest with what has happened in the past. One of the biggest things that we've done through the creation of this strategic plan, which, is both an opportunity to create a strategic plan and also an opportunity to communicate with people across the city about urban forestry, right? And so one of the ways we've been communicating with people as part of the plan is by talking very openly about the history of urban forestry in the city, how it came to be so inequitably distributed, and kind of what the situation, like Danielle was talking about, with being a Rust Belt city and losing a lot of your tax base, that has happened in Philadelphia as well, and how funding has been cut so drastically in what eras, and just the history of things. And then the current situation as well, what kind of funding the city has now to take care of the trees. In Philadelphia, we have 115,000 street trees and over 10,000 acres of parkland that we care for. And we get like 1% of the city budget for our entire Parks and Recreation department. So just being very honest about what we're working with and trying not to sweep some things under the rug, because when you really approach people and listen to the concerns that they have, you can't stand there and say, yeah, well, but the trees are more important than your fear of going bankrupt if a tree falls on your house or something like that. People have very real legitimate fears based on financial situations, the examples they actually have of people who have had some of these things happen in the past, some, tree roots in pipes and things like that. And so you have to talk to people honestly and be willing to meet them where they are. Because if you go in, some of our first communication with the Tree Philly program was a brochure that had on the back of it, it said common tree myths. Tree roots won't grow into your pipes. They only grow in the top 18 inches. The pipe laterals are 6 feet down. Yes, theoretically, that is absolutely accurate. Also, tree roots do grow into people's pipes. So you can't start from a place of denial. You have to start from a place of acceptance and moving forward together. So that's one of the biggest things for us. And that's also why a lot of our plan is looking at maintenance of the existing tree canopy as a crucial trust building activity that is going to help get people on board in neighborhoods where they are not willing to have trees in their neighborhoods because they are afraid and they have legitimate fears. So yeah, I think learning from the past, lessons learned are, this is a field that's constantly evolving. We are learning about different cultivars and different trees and how they react in an unnatural situation surrounded by concrete. And we don't always know that, for example, Zelkovas are going to be a complete disaster in the sidewalk until we completely replace our elm canopy with Zelkovas, and then we have this situation. Yeah, transparency is also really crucial to that. There's so many things running around. There are a couple other things I wanted to say too, but I'll stop for now and let someone else join in.
Like Danielle, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I would add, because Lisa already touched on a couple, but I would add there's a need for policy changes along the way as you're trying to address equity. For example, in Pittsburgh, you can't plant a street tree outside of someone's house without the property owner permission. So, which is understandable, right? Because there's a shared ownership with the sidewalk and everything. But when you have a neighborhood that's mostly renters, they're never going to have a say as to whether their street gets trees. So that's one example. Some very, proactive things we did early on, working with Lisa to change the planting specs and making sure like you need a bigger hole for your tree than this little 3x3 square so that you avoid some of these issues that cause people so much grief around trees, or better coordination with utilities. Like now Lisa has a utility forester, which is amazing. So that, all of these, as you interview people and you understand what the problem is, what negative impressions they might have of trees, you could try to address some of these issues that people have, even like Erica was saying with your planting list, not planting some of these aggressive trees where we know they're going to cause problems that people can't afford to fix. So making things as low maintenance as possible. And then lastly, I would say, if you tried something 10 years ago and it didn't work, try it again today, because attitudes change. You have new generations of people. One naysayer in a neighborhood doesn't speak for the whole neighborhood. So how do you really, don't give up, and making sure that you're working with a broad spectrum of people is important.
I think my staff will love that you said that, Danielle, because I'm always like, oh, we did that 10 years ago and I got to retry. So I'm sorry I interrupted you, Lisa.
No, I just want to say one other really important thing is to make sure you show up. I mean, you got to show up. Some of the situations in some of these underserved communities are, been there, done that, heard that, kind of thing. And I think it's really important that you have to do really well with your time management, and you need to make the time to, get your out into the neighborhoods and do the outreach and really show up and follow up and let folks know that you're there to help.
All right. Well, I know we're getting close. I do have one question. I think it's more of just kind of a pointing at each other here. Who do you think should be taking responsibility? I know it's a partnership here, but is it the nonprofit world or is it the city when we're talking about trees and equity? I mean, who really should be owning the process in y'all's opinion?
I think
All of the above.
Yeah.
Society.
Okay.
You
I
know.
mean,
I'm glad you answered all of the above, but
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think, I think the city really, in my particular case, and I think maybe for other cities too, that, we have to own up to responsibilities and it's just part of infrastructure, just like you can tell what's happened with the city recently in the news with the bridge. I mean, trees are part of infrastructure and it's something that they really have, there's been a struggle, just making sure that trees are considered part of infrastructure. And just sort of maybe segues into something else. The city worked on it was called the Vanguard Cities Urban Forestry portfolio. It was around the Trees for Community Recovery Act. And there was 9 other cities that worked closely with the federal government to try to get trees put into the infrastructure bill, to be considered part of infrastructure. And I think everybody knows, nationally what needs to happen there. So I think it's all levels of, responsibility. And, but I also really feel that maybe there's a little bit more trust with the nonprofits versus the cities, or government agencies. So, that's my take on it. So.
I don't know if anybody wants to add to that. I thought it was a perfect answer. Trees are infrastructure, and that is the city's responsibility. Although nonprofit partners can help so much with the planning of where and how we get trees out there and that communication with community. So my last question before we go into the audience questions, we have this new tool, and we have cities like all of ours that have trying to pave the way for addressing tree equity. What do you see as some of the best opportunities for cities to move forward to address this issue specifically and beyond the tree equity score? I'm going to call on you, somebody. All right.
It's like Natalie wants to say something.
Yeah, I was kind of reading the question through with you, but then you kind of reworded it maybe in your own way. So I'll just kind of give you the answer I've been working on myself. So we have this tool, we have this information, we have this data. We need to do something with it, correct? Our organization, we have kind of each layer. So we have the income layer, we have the air pollution layer, we have the tree canopy layer, we have all these layers posted up in the office. So we're easily, like if someone comes to us and they're like, hi, we want to come in somewhere that is I'm really into helping communities with a lot of air pollution. And so we're easily able to take this data, take this tool that has been granted to us and done for us and target those communities. I know I've kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, a little bit sprinkled throughout my conversation. So collectively, all this data for the city of Houston, like many other cities, we have created this math plan. And so I don't work for the city, but they have created this plan using this data to promote 4.6 million trees in 10 years. And that's an amazing number. And as an organization, as the nonprofit organization that is largely, we don't have much competition here. I know other organizations like ourselves are starting to pop up, which is incredible because we can't do this alone. So alone, Trees for Houston has
Natalie, you're freezing up, I believe. You could try to turn your camera off. Danielle, did you or Erica or Lisa have anything to add to that specifically?
I would just say, what really pops into my mind first is to harness the energy of, oh, there she is.
I think she is. You're back.
I'm so sorry. Was I unconnected for a long time?
About 15 or 20 seconds. It's fine.
I'm sorry. I just got the notification that I was unstable connection. Dang it, I was on a roll too. Yeah, so it's just echoing the same kind of narrative that I've been explaining, that these communities that we are focusing and keying in on, they are just kind of the stepping stones to really completing this mission of getting these master plans completed. Not only is it because it's just about tree numbers, but it's also making the difference.
Thank you. Danielle, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to add on, there's the really practical opportunities, like Erica and other cities have their tree distribution programs, which, really make so much sense. And there's such an opportunity, and corporations love it, and so on. But also, harnessing the energy of young people right now, teenagers and college kids who really care about equity right now. I mean, it's just everywhere. And, I think just really focusing in and educating the public about this topic is going to help you gain a lot more volunteers and advocates.
Okay, well, thank you, Danielle. I think we're going to have Chris join us back, and we're going to look at some of the audience questions. Which one?
Hey, Greg, I did answer a lot on the way in the chat, but we can certainly revisit them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not following the chat, so it's
Oh, okay. No, sorry, in the Q&A. Sorry about that.
Sorry, yeah. I appreciate the answering that. So why don't we look at so the comment number 19. See, we're looking at, here we go. With only lower income folks are sometimes fearful of costs for tree maintenance. With only options being yard trees, et cetera, given space and soil volume issues, how do we address maintenance costs for helping these folks? I like what Erica is saying regarding listening and transparency, perhaps tax incentives, or is that, I'm gonna add them this piece. That's pretty challenging, tax incentives, but. So I guess that question is,
Yeah. It's,
Go
go ahead,
Danielle.
Lise.
I was just going to say it's about right tree, right place, making
Yep,
sure that,
yep.
folks have an educated, decision when they're planting their trees, and they have, some basic care instructions, and making sure that you're not, you're planting the appropriate species. And for us, we rely on our nonprofit partners, of course, who support the tree giveaways to provide that information. But I would say that would be one major thing.
That's my exact answer, Lisa. See, this is why nanu.
Nanu. Anybody else want to add on to that one?
Yeah, I would love to. I completely agree. And we also, I responded in the chat about what kind of trees we give away. We focus on native species, but we also do some fruit trees. And we know that fruit trees can be challenging to take care of, and you don't always get what you are hoping to get or expect to get. We work really closely with an amazing organization called the Philadelphia Orchard Project to get people connected with their education about how to care for fruit trees. And we also make sure that we are getting their advice. So, in terms of lessons learned, we were trying to give away trees, fruit trees that were low maintenance. So a lot of our fruit trees we're giving away were cultivars that are resistant to certain things. But we found in conversation with them that we weren't really doing it right. And we were giving away apples because we found some, good varieties that were disease resistant, but we, because we have a close relationship with them, they were able to kind of give us the hard feedback that, like, we need to stop giving away apples and peaches because when people are not doing it with enough information and when it's not a really concerted effort to control some of the diseases that can come through, it's just creating a larger population of that disease that can go out to the other. You're just spreading the disease around. So just as an example of, like, how do you get resources to people to be able to plant and care for the trees that you're giving away? Partnering with other nonprofits is fantastic. But also one of the things that we are trying to tackle through our plan is, how do you fund some sort of a cost share program, or even a program, a workforce program where people can go and tackle weed trees before they become a nuisance and before they become a problem? Because a lot of the trees that have become a burden for people in Philadelphia, and I would imagine most cities, are trees that nobody planted, right? So you have to come up with a way of addressing those trees that are weed trees that are creating issues that people can't afford to remove. And we don't have a solution for it yet, but it all comes back to money always.
Yeah, money is always that stumbling block.
Yeah.
One of the things I think y'all all mentioned it very specifically, it's not just the right tree, but it's the right place. And I think spending the time with homeowners to figure out where that right place is makes a big difference. Of course, time means money for staff as well. So it's that balance that we're always trying to work at. Definitely a little bit of a challenge there. There's a question here that I thought was something that y'all probably all know. Are you finding from some of your master planning, and of course I have a whole question on master plan versus strategic plan, which we could talk about, might get us a little bit off the equity, but where are we losing our trees the most? Where are we seeing that canopy is actually going down? And are we seeing that it is also in lower income neighborhoods, or is it across the board? Is there anything y'all can share with us on that, particularly with your city, on where our canopy is disappearing most?
Ours is residential property largely, and it's a lot of just trees that are aging out, that are just coming down. People are getting scared, I think, with more storms. And then, of course, we've had the rise of different oak wilts and emerald ash borer. So pests and disease are a part of it. And then third, I would say there's a lot of utility infrastructure work happening. We're an old city, our gas lines, and Lisa could talk about this forever. Gas lines, water lines with the lead issue, there's a lot of replacement happening, and utility expansion. And we're seeing literal, like, straight lines of tree loss that you can tell are their utility work, or road infrastructure, bridge infrastructure. So that's a big issue for us. And I won't say it's everywhere. It's across the board. It's not disproportionate anywhere.
Is anybody else seeing anything specific for their cities? In Atlanta, ours is development is probably the biggest issue in tree loss, and very similar to y'all, 80% of our canopy is on single family residential. So we're seeing a lot of small houses being removed for large houses, and that's where we're losing the majority of our canopy. We also have aging street trees as well. But Natalie and Erica, have y'all studied that? And is it any specific income level or neighborhood, or is it just across the board? Or are you having tree growth in your city, which is awesome?
Well, we've had 6% tree loss in the last 10 years, unfortunately. And yes, it is on a lot of residential land. It does not mirror the low tree canopy map. So the tree loss is happening in other places, and it is a lot on residential land where people are proactively taking trees down because of increased storms, development as well. We have not done a study in the city of Philadelphia to say, like, here's the number one reason, for example, but we do know that residential land is the number one land use that has the majority of trees, has the most space for trees, and lost the majority of trees in the last 10 years. So the decisions that people are making on their individual land is impacting on a citywide basis what's happening to our canopy. There was something else I was going to say, but I lost it. I'll let Natalie go.
Yeah, I echo every other organization. It is kind of across the board. I personally have not looked into the data of it, just because our organization primarily focuses just on planting and distributing trees. But as a personal opinion of what I have seen driving through the area and using of the parks as a resident, I feel like I kind of see more of the canopy loss more in, yes, the residential areas, but also in some of our public spaces. Houston our urban area is pretty well established. There's not a lot of elbow room to grow. So we're more of expanding on the outsides of the suburban areas where historically Houston is actually a relatively grassland prairie area. So there already isn't trees out there. I would love to get out there and continue to plant trees, but some of these communities are very, very specific on the types of trees that are getting planted, the size of trees they get planted. So there's restraints that Trees for Houston isn't able to kind of get out. I think of specifically where I live, actually, we can't even get our organization out there to do the plantings. So that is definitely something we've ran into. But a lot of times after a big storm, we had actually, let's reel it back. We had a huge drought here in 2011. I was not around for that, but I have seen the effects of it. So I used to be a conservation tech at a city park here. And so after each storm, it could just be a relatively calm thunderstorm in the late afternoon. And we would have 4 or 5 large old post oaks that have just fallen over. And if they haven't taken out power lines or a picnic table, they're gone. And so that is something that we have seen the outcomes of. Why I say my personal opinion, how I see it, is that it's mainly in these public spaces is because majority of the spaces that do have good tree canopy coverage are these more affluent neighborhoods that do have the money to remove a tree if it needs to be removed, but also replant it at the same time. So they're balancing that removal addition out. So that's just how I've seen it. Like I said, I haven't looked into the data of it, but it's just something to consider and think about.
And it sounds like climate, I mean, it's almost maybe a climate change issue that we're losing more trees, and eventually that will affect, entire cities and not just poor cities and poor part of the cities, because climate's an equalizer to some extent when you're talking about one in a community. Lisa, it looked like you wanted to add in something but I may have been imagining it.
No, I was just going to sort of concur with a lot of that. And, climate change has a lot to do with it. We've seen some horrific storms roll through here, microbursts. We had one not too long ago that wiped out a large canopy in our cemetery. That we had lost some older trees, old growth trees. And also that we did have our mayor work on an executive order that would provide for the city's partner organizations like the Urban Redevelopment Authority and the Port Authority, Housing Authority, so that they would have more of a awareness around tree canopy and not just go through trying to clear cut areas just because it makes it easier to go in and develop. I mean, we've had some success with that to the extent where we've been able to, have some specific construction specifications in around, tree protection, and taking those extra measures to maybe give credits for trees to preserve them versus, removing them. And of course, our utility arborist that Danielle mentioned, just having a person in that key role that can work closely with all of our utilities. A lot of things happen we experience too in our parks and open spaces for stormwater projects and things like that, where they're removing trees, which makes no sense, because of trees, how they contribute to stormwater, but also providing for replacement and restoration, so there's sort of a cycle. As trees get removed, trees get replaced. But anyway, just to add that onto it.
So there's a question here. I think it says, what kind of city codes are in each of the cities that promote new or existing trees? Well, this changes a little bit, and that are there some codes that are increasing equitable planting of trees? Is there any anything active in codes that you're seeing in your cities that are doing a better job of getting trees where they're needed?
Well, I can say for Pittsburgh, we've always had in our environmental standards as part of our zoning development review process, the requirements to submit tree surveys, and trees that are over 12 inches of DBH have to be replaced in inches for inches. It's nowhere near the benefit, the actual value of a tree, but it's sort of like a no net loss of inches sort of policy where, you know, if we're taking out so many inches, we're replacing those inches someplace else. Although, you know, it takes time to get to the point where you were to make up for the canopy loss. You know, one thing that we have going on now, and Danielle can, you know, chime in here, is that, you know, some of our neighborhood plans that are underway are including, you know, increasing tree canopy. So we're using this data to see what the percentage of canopy is versus what, you know, the goals to work towards, you know, increasing that canopy. And we haven't really had that too much as part of the process in the past, but now that's something that Tree Pittsburgh's actively participating in our neighborhood planning. So
We also have a steep slope protection, like a zoning layer for steep slopes, which has allowed Pittsburgh to get a lot of green space preserved. But in Pennsylvania, and Erica, I don't know if you've come across this yet, there's a timber rule that you could actually timber, you know, for profit, a swath of land, and get away with, you know, not following a lot of the local ordinances. And I've seen it, at least I saw it in Millville, you know, it's happening around in these like semi-urban areas where it really was not meant to be applied. But it's this weird Pennsylvania law that exists that we're seeing used in our county, which is really disturbing for us to see total clear cutting without much consequence.
Wow, yeah, we have not encountered that yet. Though now that it's out there, I'm sure that that earworm will make its way into some of the developers. Because we do have some industrial land that has become forested and wooded over time, as it's been kind of waiting for development. And so that some of those we're losing, you know, because they are now being developed. We do have a tree replacement policy in our zoning code, similar to what Lisa said. It's for all trees over 2.5 inch caliper, actually. And then we also have, we also have a heritage tree ordinance, which states that all trees over 24 inches of a certain, on a certain species list, so typically native trees, can't be removed unless you get a special exception, which you know, is a whole separate process. So we have some they're not tree protection so much as tree replacement requirements in our code through the zoning process. We also have tree planting requirements in the zoning code, but there's really not much to incentivize preserving trees through development, and there's no protection for trees on land outside of the development process in Philadelphia. As for things that are incentivizing equity, we are trying to explore ways of collecting fees and fines in the development process for trees that do not get planted that are required, and then using that money to plant in priority areas. But that's not currently in the code. So we're trying to figure out how we can do things like that.
Anybody else have anything to add on that one? Nope. Gilbert, has anybody seen any other cities that are making better or more quick movement in some of the equity issues around tree canopy? Have y'all heard of other cities, or do you think, you know, maybe Pittsburgh's the outlier and getting a little bit ahead of the game? Are there any other cities that we should be looking into and modeling after that y'all are aware of? Okay. So Erica, do you have anything, or because I know we're all thinking? I'm so kind of.
I feel like we're kind of all kind of even paced.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to management best practices, I always look to what New York City Parks is doing, and DC, Washington, DC. They're all quite proactive. And I think that Baltimore is doing some really cool stuff too. But yeah, we do talk a lot amongst those of us who are doing this work. And I would say that in terms of tree equity specifically, Yeah, I think other cities are doing things in line with what we're doing.
And a lot of it has to do with who makes decisions. You know, when you have a central government that can go in, like New York City, you know, they own it all. So they go in and they plant trees where they want to plant trees for the most part. And in Pittsburgh, you can't do that. Like I said, you have to have the property owner permission. So it's interesting, you know, to kind of look at the whole context. But yeah, I love New York was our go-to, and Philly for that matter, Erica, way back when we were getting started.
Trees for Houston's go-to is actually Trees Atlanta. So that's typically we'll look to you guys for, I know when I came on, it's been over a year, about a year now. It was kind of like trying to see how to rebuild our volunteer program. As everyone, we all went through COVID and we kind of halted that. And about the time I came in, we decided we were going to take our next planting season and really just get it back going, see what we can do and how we can engage younger individuals, young professionals. And so we just kind of looked at how Trees Atlanta is doing that.
We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you
Wasn't
guys
looking
so
for it,
much.
but we appreciate it.
I know
Chris,
when
I don't know if you know.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Chris, I don't know if you had any, if you knew some cities that are doing anything creative that we should also be looking at in the future that are a little bit talking about some things that we haven't talked about today. Do you know of any cities that are addressing some of the equity issues in different ways that some of these, the listener can look into?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the ones that we've looked at as models in the past are similar to what Erica and Danielle have mentioned, New York, DC, but at least new things that are happening. The city of Phoenix is a little different than many of the places here, but they adopted tree equity as a sort of in city council and adopted the tree equity score map as a way that that's going to drive how they plant trees and increase their tree canopy cover in the city. That's
an easy city
brand
to do
new.
it in, right? Arizona. You think of Arizona makes it easier.
Yeah.
Even less tree cover than Houston.
Yes, exactly. But that's one example of sort of a at least ordinance or within policy wise. I can't think of other specific ones right now, but I think it's an important question, and that's something that we should be sort of building off of with, I think, I can't remember who was mentioning this earlier, talking about storytelling. I think maybe it was you, Danielle, that, we have this data, but being able to link it to stories about how people are addressing this issue, I think it's a really powerful way to sort of continue to advance that advanced tree equity. So something that we're hopefully going to be incorporating more into our suite of resources as well.
Well, kind of to lead off of that, what do you think you're going to be doing with tree equity, the next step that's going to help cities and organizations use your data more effectively, or frankly, more simple for some of us that need it even more simply brought to us? What y'all have a next step that we could all prepare ourselves for?
Yeah, so I mean, we are going to come out with a new tool. I'm hesitant to say that it's going to be simpler, but it might allow you to break down the data in maybe more interesting ways, do more comparisons of tree canopy and priority indicators within or across neighborhoods within a city. But I think so. Just a couple of things that we're doing. I think some of them will sort of get to that, Greg, is sort of more like summarized reporting. This is what's going on in your city in general. The thing, and we talked about this along the way, you already know a lot of that already about your city, the stuff that the summarizations that we're doing related to tree equity score, but maybe some other cities that don't have a Trees Atlanta or a Trees for Houston, those kind of, that they can maybe get a little bit more benefit out of things like that. But I do think that we're gonna call it it's gonna even make it sound even less simple, the Analytics Explorer, but it will allow you to very simply compare, two data sets within your city, for example, people in poverty and tree canopy cover, or the impacts of our health index, or and trees. I mean, I always want to bring it back to trees because that's what we're talking about, but being able to compare those data sets or those measures within a city, I think will be able to very powerfully and simply, through a single graph or a single chart, be able to help tell that story. But I'll just finish up with this. We're open to suggestions too. This is living, we think we've done a lot right, but yeah.
Speaking of suggestions, are there any great panelists? I really appreciate y'all. Any final comments that y'all wanted to make that are burning before Rebecca wraps it up?
Just thanks for having us, and I'm excited to be sitting on a panel with such awesome organizations and people. And thanks everyone for watching.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So Rebecca, I think you're going to wrap it up for us. Again,
Yeah.
thank you everybody for taking part.
Yeah, thanks again to all of our panelists from American Forests, Tree for Houston, Tree Philly, Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, City of Pittsburgh, Tree Pittsburgh, and the City of Seattle. And everyone behind the scenes that no one can see, our Trees Atlanta staff, Michelle, Casey, Sabrina, Judy, and Lynn. It takes a lot of people to make these panel things happen. So thank you very much for everyone and for you participating. I think it's provided good information on how we as organizations and organizations in your area could be utilizing this tool perhaps in your communities. And I think based on the conversations that we've had today, we know there is so much more that really needs to be done in regards to equity within our communities, as well as representation. Discussing equity and tree equity in communities can be a sensitive subject at times. And so, we are aware of, the representation on this panel is not where it needs to be. And we acknowledge that we need to work harder on that. And so kind of just thinking about that and seeing how we bring more diverse voices into the conversation. I've been hearing some of that from discussions from the panelists. And I think as tree organizations, we just have to stay connected with the residents in the neighborhoods that this tree equity score is talking to us about, and listen to what they need and what they're wanting. So with that, I just want to have everyone stay tuned for the recording. Give us time as we take all the questions, get the remaining questions answered for everyone. We will send that along to you to the email address that you registered with. And then please note that we are always trying to do a better job of meeting people with the information that they need. So a survey will pop up at the conclusion of this. If you can take a few moments to fill that out, we will also share that feedback with our panelists so they have it as well. Maybe you didn't get a question out there that you were really hoping to get asked. Feel free to email at education@treesatlanta.org, and we will make sure to get to the right panelists. And then I would be not doing my job if I didn't promote another program, right? So we will be having a few more virtual events coming up this March in preparation for our annual native plant sale, a couple of virtual lunch and learns, Ask an Experts, talking about native plants in the community. So you might want to check those out via our newsletters. And thank you, Greg. It's Arbor Day this Friday, so we are going all out. Happy Arbor Day to everyone. Thanks for participating and thanks for being engaged in the conversation. And from everyone here at Trees Atlanta. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.